Okay guys, it's Saturday, July the 8th, and we took 3 heifers to the processor a couple weeks ago, just got them back this week, and I thought you all may be interested in seeing a video of how, what it looks like to fill out a cutting card, what it, what hanging weights and take-home weights, and kind of what we look at when we value the value of the animal versus the value of the beef, and kind of what numbers go into that. So today's talk may be a little more academic, maybe a little more math related, but hopefully, if you've never had to fill out a cutting card before, or if you have and just want to see how somebody else does it, we thought this may be interesting. So Melissa's going to help me with this one today. These are 3 open heifers. Well, 1 cow, 2 heifers that we're going to process for beef. The red one is a registered red Angus. She's 2 years old. She should be bred. She's open. This black one in the middle is a 3-year-old cow. She again is open. And this other black one is another 2-year-old cow, and she is open. So they're all going to be going to be processed in like 2 days. So we're sorting them out. Some of these I hate to cull, but they'll make good beef, and they didn't get bred like they should have. So you can see kind of what we're shooting for with grass finished beef. The black cow in the middle did have a calf last year, but she did not breed back. And the 2 blacks are a quarter Simmental and like a quarter Angus and half red Angus, and the red one's purebred registered red Angus. We just dropped off our 3 heifers. Got the butcher shop there behind me, so kind of unload. They have a small pen you unload into, and then it's a USDA inspected facility, so they'll have a USDA inspector on site today. I was surprised by our weights, actually a little bit heavier than I thought on 2 of them. So the biggest black heifer is a 2-year-old. She weighed 1,230 pounds. The 3-year-old cow weighed 1,170. She was also black. And then the smaller red heifer was a 2-year-old, and she weighed 890. We'll kind of show you how to fill out a cutting card and kind of what kind of math I do when I try to figure out the value of the animal and value of the beef and all that stuff. So this is what the cutting card looks like. I'm just going to scan over it, and then Melissa's going to talk about it. But you're basically, deciding which steaks roast, and what you want ground versus not ground. So this is just for reference sake if you want to go back and look at it.
Okay, so we thought that we would take you guys kind of through a cut sheet. I have a general approach every time I fill one of these out, and I'm just going to kind of take you through that to show you the different cuts we choose and why and things like that. And just, I'm sure you know this already, but every butcher is going to have a different cutting sheet, but the general idea is the same because you can only cut a cow up into so many different parts. So the general idea is going to be the same wherever you go, but they may look a little bit different. So they're always going to ask information, things like that, tag numbers, whether you want USDA or custom on your processing. We are fortunate to have a USDA butcher shop really close to us, and I choose USDA processing every single time, even on my whole animals that I'm selling whole to a person, which I could choose custom for those. But my general approach when I am filling out a cutting sheet at any time is to create cuts that are going to be versatile, that I can sell to anybody, regardless of what happens. So if I chose custom on a whole steer and then someone backed out on that, it would be difficult. It would be more difficult for me to be able to find a home for that beef. So
why is that?
Why is that? Because in Kentucky, and this is different in different, well, this part's not different in different states, but in the state of Kentucky, I cannot sell legally retail cuts unless they are USDA inspected.
What does it mean to be USDA inspected?
USDA inspection means the there is a USDA inspector on site when the cattle are butchered, when they're killed, and then also when they are butchered into cuts. And the processing facility has had to undergo different types of inspection when it was being constructed, and they had to construct to a slightly different standard to qualify for USDA inspection.
And if it's not USDA inspected, then they'll put a thing on your label that says not for resale.
Right. In Kentucky, it's retail exempt. So it will say, it'll say not for retail. I do understand that in different states, there is something called state inspection, and we do not have that in Kentucky. I wish we did, but it's kind of an in-between between USDA and custom that allows you to sell by the cut within that state. I don't think you can cross state lines with state inspection. So USDA inspection covers our butt on everything. So we're fortunate to have an inspector, a processing plant close to us that is USDA inspected. So I just go that route on everything. It's a little bit more expensive, but as with everything, we pass that cost along to our customer, and that's just kind of the way it is. So as I'm going through this, I'm thinking about the cuts that I know my customers like the best. I am thinking about a variety of cuts. I'm thinking about bone-in versus boneless cuts. And I'm just trying to maximize the use of the animal. So I know that our customers, and this is going to vary whoever your customer base is, but my customer base personally, cube steak is not a big seller for them, but round steaks sell pretty well. Top round roast sells well, stew meat sells well, and ground beef sells well. So all those are cuts from the round. So I'm going to choose the cuts that I know that my customer is going to prefer. And I'm not going to choose cuts that I know I'm going to have trouble selling. And all of this takes a lot of trial and error, kind of as you're getting to know your customers. And it's good to ask customers what they want. So this sheet goes through the round. It has roasts. I choose roasts are kind of a seasonal thing for us too. In the summer, I may choose to get less roasts because people aren't cooking them as often as in the winter. Then sirloin would be next. I choose sirloin steaks. You could have those ground if you wanted, but I can't imagine why. And so this leads me to a point on my sheet that sometimes there are cuts that you know that you want that are not an option on your cut sheet. And for instance, in the sirloin for us, I want the tri-tip. That's not a common cut that a lot of people get at our processor, but it's a cut that I know my customers like, and we like it personally. I had kind of found that out. I have a really good relationship with our processor. And so I've asked them, can you get the tri-tip for me? Yes, easy, but I have to write that in separately on this cut sheet. It's not given as an option. And that kind of, there's a lot of value in having a really good relationship with your processor, because they tend to do you favors when you need them if you're nice to them. Some other things to consider: bone-in cuts versus boneless. If you all probably know this already, but if you choose T-bone steaks, then you're not going to get your filet and New York strip steaks. So T-bones look really cool, but they're not something that sells super well for us. So I pretty much always get the filet and the New York strip. You may live in an area where people only want T-bones, and so you can choose that. Ribeyes, we used to only get, when we started, we only got boneless ribeye steaks because I had it in my head that that's what people wanted. And gradually I started having customers ask for bone-in ribeyes, so we started getting them. And cuts like that, and the T-bone as well, you know, when you get these bone-in cuts, your customers are paying for the bone as well, which is a good thing if you're the producer. So that's just something to consider. As well, chuck roast, you can do boneless or bone-in chuck roast, or if I'm heavy on chuck roast, I might choose to grind the entire chuck into a special grind of ground chuck. That's something that I've been doing lately because I've had more customers asking about ground chuck. Some other cuts that are on here: brisket, short ribs, flank steak, skirt steak, stew meat. Sometimes if I'm heavy on roasts, I'll have them cut some of our roasts up into stew meat. That's something that sells well for customers. And then we can do some specialty things like patties, burger patties. I can't imagine paying extra to have someone else patty out a burger for me, but people love the burger patties, and that's something that we get regularly. And then another option that we choose that is not on the sheet, but our processor does for us, are brats, beef brats, and we found that those sell really well in our area. And kind of the last thing I wanted to mention on here as we're wrapping up the cut sheet: don't discredit weird things, or things that some people may consider weird, like your organs and your bones and your tallow. Some of those more unusual organ meats are actually in really high demand right now. I could not keep tallow in stock if I had it. I get asked about it all the time. Oxtail is another cut that when I have an oxtail, I mean, it rarely stays in the freezer for very long at all if people realize that I have it. So don't give those cuts away. There's a market for it, and you should be able to be recouping income from even things like organs.
And the other thing I was going to bring up is that it does cost extra to have patties. So patties cost, I think, $1 a package, which is a 1 pound package.
Sure.
So, you know, it costs $1 to have patties made per package.
Yep.
I think the
and
brats right now are close to $2.
$2
I think the jalapeno cheddar are $2.70 a pound, maybe two something a pound extra. So, you know, we have to charge extra for those products.
So you're paying a little extra for those, but it's also helping use up some of that ground beef. You're always, however you have your steer processed, you're going to end up with at least 50% ground beef, even if you maximize all of your cuts. And so sometimes that ground beef stacks up in the freezer, and so doing things like the patties, the brats, other types of sausages can really help you move some of that ground beef instead of it just piling up in the freezer.
So traditionally, when we get all this back, we're usually getting back sirloin steak, ribeye steak, filet, New York strip. We're getting back, in general, rump roast, sirloin tip roast. We only get two tri-tip, only 2 per cow. You're getting back, what am I leaving out? Your chuck roast.
My product list is
short
so
ribs.
long. Yep, short ribs, long
Brisket.
ribs, flat iron steaks, flank steaks. There are so many cuts that you can get back, and you just kind of have to figure out what your customer likes the best, or you know, just what sells best and what you can combine into bundles to help move some of that product as well.
Okay, so we'll go back to the heifers that we had taken to the processor. So you know, I mentioned on weights, you know, the smallest one only weighed 890, but she's just a smaller frame cow, or heifer. She was a 2-year-old. The other 2-year-old that had like a quarter Simmental, she weighed 1,230 pounds. And then she had a half sister, I take it back, a full sister that was a 3-year-old that we had taken, and she weighed 1,170. So that's our live weights. So from live weight, you know, the hanging weight, how do they calculate that? So the hanging weight is basically, you know, the sides of beef hanging on the rail. Our beef is dry aged for 14 days, so it's going to hang, the sides are going to hang for 14 days in the cooler at the processor. So your percentage of hanging weight, or your hanging weight on the 890 pound animal was 506 pounds. On the bigger animal, the hanging weight on the 1230 pound heifer, hanging weight was 680 pounds. And then, so percentages, you want it to be somewhere around 60% ideally. A lot of times on the grass finished stuff, it can range from anywhere from 55 to 60%. So on the smaller heifer, that was 57% hanging weight. And on the larger heifer, that was 55% hanging weight. So that's decent. And then your take-home weight. So how much beef did we actually take home from those animals? So on the 890 pound animal, we took home 321 pounds of packaged meat. So, you know, obviously some of the hanging sides are going to be bone and other things that are not going to be able to be packaged to take home to eat. So again, from the 890 pound live animal, we took home 321 pounds of packaged meat that was frozen. On the larger heifer, the 1230 pound live weight heifer, we took home 423 pounds of packaged meat. So roughly right at a little over 100 pounds more meat in that heifer. You know, that's why the cattle size can be kind of a tricky thing. You want cows to be able to fatten easy on grass, but a bigger animal in general is going to produce more meat. So, you know, when it comes to processing those animals, you know, ideally would like a steer to weigh 1,050, 1,100 pounds, or even close to 1,200. But my cows, I like to be between 950 up to about 1,200 at the top. Yeah, so then we talked about costs, or talk about how much a steer or heifer is worth. It can be a little bit tricky thing to figure out. One thing you can kind of use as a rough gauge is what the commodity cattle are bringing. So cattle leaving a feedlot, they have a futures market for that. Right now, the futures market is higher than it's ever been, and it's roughly close to $1.80 a pound. So that means a steer leaving the feedlot, going to, you know, a massive processing facility, they're getting about $1.80 a pound live weight. That's also currently what we're charging, what we're valuing our steers at. It's hard to get the value much higher than that, honestly, right now. And to give you a reference point, 3 or 4 years ago, it was only around $1.40 a pound. So it is high right now in retrospect. So the math on that, so the 890 pound heifer, if she's worth $1.80 a pound, that makes her value at $1,600. On the larger heifer that weighed 1,230 pounds at $1.80 a pound, that made her value, let's see, that would be $2,214. So you can see that that extra weight makes her worth quite a bit more money. So that's one thing I wanted to mention. So I think we need to separate out kind of our farm production versus our meat sales business, for lack of a better word. So you know, our farm needs to be able to make money by valuing these animals at what I valued them at. If it can't make money at that value, then we need to be able to sell the value the animal needs to be higher. And then we take that animal and we process it into beef, and we also need to be able to make money after we pay our processor and be able to sell that beef. So on processing cost, so on the smaller heifer, our processing cost was $505. That was total processing cost. On the larger heifer, we did have some patties made. I think we had some ground chuck made, and we also had some brats made. And the processing cost on her was $737. So basically, it's very easy math, but if you take the value of the smaller heifer, so let's take her value at $1,600, we're going to add on the $505 of processing cost, and that's going to equal roughly $2,100. So in that packaged meat that we took home, to recoup the value of the animal and the value of the processing, we need to get $2,100 out of that animal. So we got back 321 pounds of meat, and that cost us $21.07. So that ends up being $6.55 a pound. So that $2,107 divided by 321 pounds of meat ends up being $6.55. So that means our value, what we have in 1 pound of frozen meat, is going to be $6.55. So if we're selling our ground beef for $7.55, let's say, then there's only a really additional dollar difference in our meat sales. Now, if we can sell ribeye at $18 a pound, then we're making an extra roughly $12 on that per pound. So those are things you have to think about. So on the larger animal, their larger heifer, so we valued her at $2,214. Processing was $737. That gives me a total cost of $2,951. And in return, we had 423 pounds of meat, and that ended up being $6.77 a pound of packaged meat. So if I deducted the extra cost that we had in our brats and things like that, it ended up being closer to that $6.50, $6.55 mark. But we still need to recoup the cost of those brats by adding that onto the cost of the brat. So if we're selling our, ground beef for $7.50 a pound, and we need to have at least, then it costs us $2 to have those brats made, then we need to be selling brats for at least, close to $9.50 a pound. So that's why local food can tend to be more expensive. You have to find people that appreciate that. You can't compete against, big chain stores. Their scale is so much bigger. They can do things a lot cheaper than what we can. That gives you a rough idea of what, kind of the numbers we're dealing with. I hope that makes sense. And again, one thing I guess I will mention is, let's say, I mentioned we had roughly $650 in a package pound of meat. And we got 423 pounds of meat from the larger heifer. So if we can if we can sell that for an additional $1, so if we can sell it for $7.50 on average, that means we made an extra $1 a pound. So we made an extra $423 since we had 423 pounds of meat. But you really make most of your extra money from your steaks. And I think it's probably pretty straightforward because your steaks are a more expensive product. But I think hopefully that math makes sense. I'll show you all a few cuts just so you can kind of see an example of what we get back. We are overall happy with our processor. I've never talked to anybody that said their processors never made a mistake. Processors make mistakes. They're people. You kind of have to live with that to some degree. If you complain about every little thing that's wrong, then they're not going to work well for you. So you kind of have to let some things just roll off your back. I can show you some examples of something that our processor, the confusion had. There were some communication issues, and we were supposed to get steaks cut at 1.5 inches, and they accidentally cut them at 1/2 inch on one heifer. Luckily, they weren't all that way, but stuff happens, and you kind of just have to go with it. So I told Melissa, I guess we'll have to call them petite ribeyes and see if we can sell them. But I'll show you some of that, and you see some of the meat we got back. Okay, so here's some of the cuts of meat I was going to show you all. This is one of the better ribeyes. This is out of the bigger heifer. Pretty good marbling, good quality. That was cut the way we wanted it. That's a bone-in ribeye. This other one's the one that was mistakenly cut at 1/2 inch. Again, this communication issue between us and the processor. Again, the challenging part about this, it's a smaller heifer, so we wanted it at 1.5 inches thick, That way it would make the steaks heavier or more weight per steak. So these are really small and also going to be difficult to cook without burning. Here's one of our sirloins. Here's a New York strip. It's actually one of my favorite cuts. This is cut thick, 2 inches. If you have smaller animals, if you get them cut thicker, then it will make your steaks a little bit, add weight to your steaks. Again, ground beef. This is vacuum sealed. I like the way that they package these. It's helpful for thawing, and it stores for really well in the freezer. Some people do the butcher wrap or like the round tubes, and the butcher wrap tends to get freezer burn, and the round tubes are slower to thaw out. The chuck roast, bone-in chuck roast. Again, that's nicer looking chuck roast. We do get custom labels made. We have to special order those, but I think they're worth it. So hopefully that helps out and give you an idea of what the product looks like. All right, so hope that was interesting and or helpful for some of you guys. If you process a lot of meat, this is probably old hat and you probably aren't watching still. But if you're new to this or just want to see what somebody else is doing, then hopefully this helps. And if you're buying beef, then hopefully this maybe helps you understand what your options are a little bit better. Hope you guys have a good day.